Hello and welcome to another Pauper video. Today we're going to be skipping the gameplay and going deep on a deck dive, starting off with green-black gardens, or like I like to call it mono-black initiative, or mono-black good cards, instead of mono-black control with mono-black bad cards. And here I'm bringing in today a friend of mine, NYX, from the Familiars Discord, who has been playing the crud out of gardens and has a top 2 finish in the Northern Pauper Open. So he is my resident expert who's going to go over the deck with us and give us this sweet deep dive. So welcome, NYX. How's it going?
It's going not too bad, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the little introduction. We'll clarify, it was just a top three. I lost on breakers to the Wars combo player, unfortunately.
You made it to the finals 5-0, and you get
I
top
know.
3.
Down to third.
Uh, so anyway, that we'll have to get into the tournament structure later, but
Sure.
we want to kind of talk about this deck for people that aren't familiar. Basically, the way this deck works, and stop me if I'm wrong, we're playing essentially the huge draw package of Deadly Dispute and Reckoner's Bargain, which is Deadly Dispute is sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw 2, create a treasure token. So that synergizes with something like Wellspring to make it into like Ancestral Recall for 1 mana. Reckoner's Bargain, sacrifice something, draw 2. You have a huge amount of draw cards. And the reason for playing green in this deck is 1, Colony Garden, which creates a plant that you can Deadly Dispute or Reckoner's Bargain. So you don't have to actually play artifact lands to be able to do that. You've also got Blood Fountain with the potential blood tokens to Deadly Dispute. And then the other green splash is the Avenging Hunter in the main deck, which gives you initiative and is a huge payoff for keeping the board clear. Does that make sense to you?
That's a perfect explanation, actually, yeah. Pretty much all of that is exactly right.
And we're just throwing a ton of removal spells into the main deck with literally 12 1-for-1s with Defiles. And you've got this basically all swamps mana base, which is pretty cool with the new card from Lord of the Rings, Troll of Khazad-dûm.
Yes.
So
Troll is very good.
my question is, why didn't you play the Snowlands?
I honestly, I don't know if it's just the UK. There's so many Ponza players kicking around that I just didn't want to like lose to 1 damage. Just unfortunately, the Snowlands look so much better though.
You don't care though, you have pit rats. Have you ever felt like there have been positions where that 1 damage was gonna eat you? Or was this kind of a hedge?
It's a bit of both. It is a bit of a hedge, but like you are running. Well, normally I used to run more, but you are still running Snuff Out, and you've got Crypt Rats. Like there is a non-zero chance that that 1 damage could matter. A lot of games you win on very, very fine margins, so I just didn't want to I didn't want it to be that one situation where it's like my win to go to like the final round or whatever, and I lose to 1 damage off of a land
Yeah.
destruction spell.
It's kind of a meme at this point, but you should probably be playing the swamps and the regular haunted mire just for for that edge purpose. But over here, you're playing. This is from the Northern Pauper Open. Which what day did that take place?
Yeah, this was, the exact date sort of escapes me, but it was
Like
run by
last
one of my friends,
late
Dan.
September,
Like
maybe.
it was in late September. Yeah, I'm trying to find the exact date, but it was run by one of my friends, Dan. And there's some amazing guys like setting up the pauper scene in the United Kingdom. They've been doing like a lot of work recently, sort of like pulling everything together. Big shout out to them, and yeah, it's amazing, and it was sort of like the end of September. Very interesting metagame, I think.
So the rest of the deck that we didn't talk about is the Avenging Hunter, which gives you the initiative, and it's just a ton of
Yes,
huge bonuses. I'm not going to pull up the initiative itself, but essentially you have like an aggro side where you make creatures bigger and dome them for 5. You have kind of like
yes,
a side where you're scrying and creating treasure tokens, and then at the end of all the steps, you get to just dump a creature onto the table. And you have Thorn of the Black Rose as well for card advantage. The Crypt Rats is a board wipe that's really good with the Blood Fountain because you can keep getting back your board wipe. You have Suffocating Fumes. This is a bit of a hedge for Coldotha at the time.
hmm
And then it can cycle, obviously. And Spinning Darkness is another free spell, which also gains 3 and then dumps some people for 3. So what do you think? Oh, yeah, let's go ahead and get into the sideboard that you played here.
Oh, sure. This is a very interesting sideboard. I don't know if I'd play this now, but it definitely is something that exists.
So we've got
Um,
Snuff Out as another free spell. You're looking for like walls and stuff.
yeah, so like against so this is it's a very tech to the like the Pauper Open meta that I was expecting. Um, there was some amazing familiars players actually last time. Other things like ephemerate piles and such like Jeskai. Like I knew some friends bringing Jeskai and a lot of decks that like want to flicker stuff for value. In those like slower control matchups and things like that, or like where you're trying to be slow, you don't care about like I didn't want to die on turn two, like because I'm running like two stuff outs main, for example. So it's for like the slower matchups and things like that, where you just want to stop people's value, like ephemerate piles.
So you've got two now spell bombs for Graveyard Hate. Is that specifically for Terror or Ephemerate piles?
A bit of both, really. It's also just really good because it kind of cantrips itself with Deadly Dispute if you pay a mana. It's not Ancestral Recall like the Wellspring, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah. And then we got the classic Deglamour. Do you think that you're playing Deglamour because you're expecting bridges more? Or
A little
I
bit of
think we
both.
talked about
So
this later, right?
yeah, so I thought there would be a lot of bridge stuff going on. I know there's a lot of like the mid-rangey piles, especially in the paper metas more, but I was also kind of expecting Grixis to be a bit more common. But the glamour's not awful against boggles. It's pretty decent against blue-white glitters because a lot of their creatures are artifacts and you can hit the glitters as well, and their lands, which is the main thing. You get to just play land destruction spells that are also removal against those decks, which is the main thing. But yeah, not as much Grixis, because this deck is very awkward against Grixis, and I didn't want to just get blown out of the water by something like that, but it never really came up.
Yeah. And then you've got Troublemaker Oof as basically like Deglamour's 6 and 7, or five and
Yeah, on a
six.
body. Yeah.
And then a couple Weather the Storms and 4 Campfires. So this might be something that people are not familiar with, but before the event we were talking about how you're going to get life gain. And this deck doesn't chain a bunch of spells really, so Weather the Storm is a little bit risky. Whereas Campfire is a 1 mana artifact where you can pay 1 and tap it to gain 2 life. And then you can pay 2 and exile it to put all commanders you own from the command zone and from your graveyard into your hand, then shuffle your graveyard into your library. So the first part doesn't matter whatsoever. But you exiled it and you shuffle your graveyard back into your library, which is a prevent decking effect. And if people
Hmm.
have watched my Storm videos before, they've seen that I played Feldon's Cane, which is essentially the same thing, although Feldon's Cane is free. Um,
Yes.
but this stacks really crazy because I actually was playing like a Coldotha match and I ran into somebody playing 4 of these in Blue Black Terror for some reason. So the first one versus Mono Red is like, okay, I don't really care. You gain 2 life and you
Yep.
spent a mana, fine. Second one, you spend 2 mana every turn and gain 4 life. That's a lot. The third one, you're like, I'm buried. I'm
Yep,
buried.
absolutely. That was my experience actually against a lot of the more aggressive piles. Is that first one really feels bad? It's like tempo negative. I know me and Teasdale spoke about this a whole bunch, whether it's good tempo or not. And the first one on its own is not good at all. The second is pretty great, and then if you ever get like three or four of these things just going and ticking up, the amount of value you just like life gain, sorry, you just drown. It's so much card like virtual card advantage,
Right.
because for burn it's like one mana is like 3 damage ish, right? So being able to pay one and mitigate two of that cuts a lot of their like card advantage away.
Yeah, and if you're able to actually like one of the cool things about Campfire is that you're able to like rebuild after crypt ratsing and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly.
So I
It
felt like
also
it
in
makes sense to be kind of a synergistic effect.
Yeah, it works well, especially in those like some in the aggro matchups. Weirdly, because a lot of the aggro decks are very creature based, you really want the Crypt Rats to be able to sort of like blow them out. Like if they drop a bunch of Kuldotha tokens, the Crypt Rats can sweep them, and you basically win that game if you can keep a good board presence. A lot of the issue you sometimes get is how do I get that just small amount of life so they don't just kill me with like a bolt afterwards, and it can just like
Right.
hedge that difference.
So um, when you played in your tournament, what kind of decks did you face?
Yeah, so I played against. Fortunately, I guess. Well, I say fortunately, I played 3 Kuldothas, which is good in this case because I was planning for it.
Right.
If I hadn't teched as much like I had here, because I was expecting a lot of Kuldotha, I don't know if I would have been able to be as successful. That's another thing I'll probably mention. It's like I think this deck really, really needs to be proactive in its deck building. You can't really just take a stock list and run it. You have to kind of be a bit aware. But I played, trying to find it. I've got it written down over here somewhere.
I've noticed basically when I'm playing my like Stormburn or Kalotha sticker deck, and you're coming when I face a green black deck, I feel extremely favored unless their entire deck is built to beat me. Because
Exactly.
what you're looking at here with this deck is you've got 12 1-for-1s. And if I'm spewing out Kuldotha tokens, these don't matter whatsoever. The Crypto Rats comes online pretty late. The Suffocating Fumes is pretty, like, turn 3 Fumes is, you can definitely play around it a little bit. But if you take all
Yes.
these 1-for-1s and turn them into sweepers, 2-for-1s, etc., then you're way more well positioned. And that's something that Eisen started doing. Um,
Yes.
so with this specific list, why don't we talk about like um, what the good matchups are for this kind of list? Like your 1-for-1 removal. We've got like in the metagame right now, the top of the metagame is Burn. We're talking about it's not really
Yes.
well set up because it's teched as a 1-for-1 deck, so it's like anti min range. You'd say anti. Is this really an anti
Yeah.
aggro deck?
I think this deck preys on like mid-range piles. Well, it depends on the mid-range piles. The ones that play Ephemerate are very awkward. So like it's less played now and it was at the time too, but like Ores of Ephemerate and stuff like that can be quite awkward. But like Borrow Synth, I think is a good matchup for this deck. Core Gates with this list is not awful. It's not amazing either. That matchup's always very 50-50 in my opinion.
Is it
Like
just have
post
to basically on whether or not they draw Guardian?
Yeah, like you have 4 chainers, right, to deal with the Guardian, and you have because getting to Guardian is fairly slow for them, so you can like usually Crypt Rats to clear away or like Fumes to clear the way, and then get them with the chainers either flashbacked or from hand. But yeah, the fact that it's the cats, I think, is the main issue because you are trying to 1-for-1 a lot of the time, and then use your superior draw engine to like kind of bury them. But the moment they can start getting like the cat's value from like modern age, and then they can play the cats twice, and you have to kill it every time because it can gain too much life, it
Right.
becomes a real big issue. Yeah.
And they also can take the initiative pretty easily because they're going wide. So you have
Yeah.
like your big power top end is kind of nullified a little bit.
Yeah, and this was a trend I noticed at the Pauper Open. I pulled up the match spread I had as well now. But a lot of the matches, I was just cutting like half of my hunters in pretty much every match, which has kind of led to the developments I've been playing with recently. But my match one was against Cordova Bread, which I won 2-1. Again, a lot of my games were 2-1s, and a lot of that is because of this deck is very sideboard dependent, I think, versus a lot of matchups.
Right.
So 2-1 versus Cordova Red. My match 2 was against Flickertron, which is not something I was prepared for really at all. They had they had 2 win cons. So one of them was the compulsive research thing, and the other one was Rolling
The
Thunder.
infinite mana loop.
Yes, but they tried to value deck me. I don't think they noticed how good Campfire was for the shuffle effect, but
Oh.
they lost. Yeah, they lost a lot of tempo, not realizing I could anti like deck myself. So I just shuffled my stuff back in, and that bought me a lot of time actually. I actually had 5 minutes going into the final match of this because we had like a 5 minute game one where I just killed them. Then the next game went on for ages, and then the final game I managed to get initiative on turn like 4 because of a deadly dispute and just kill them before they could do anything, which is very
Yep.
fortunate.
As a familiars player, I'm always looking to stop that initiative turn for. It's such a
Yes,
base,
that's
such a
yeah,
problem.
like that's your real like win con against those slower decks because like if Flickertron or Familiars gets to set up, they will just absolutely bury you in card advantage and board presence, and you can't really let that happen. Otherwise, it's kind of over.
So is
Oh,
this deck better against? So it's like set up. You were tech versus Burn. I think Colgate's
yeah.
not great, but you're saying like maybe because this was a paper meta and there's so many more mid range players in paper and kind of like
Mhm.
and terror players. Is this list better versus terror because you just have so many one for ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gardens, it's very hard when you're like a mono black core, because that's what this deck is, right? I think it's very, very hard to be bad against Terror, or like to be awful anyway. It's at least 50%. But like having the mainboard chainers plus like Defile is, if you can get there, is very strong stuff out as well. It's very awkward for them to deal with. Way, way back in the first ever Northern Pauper Open, I was on the Guildsworn Prowlers thing too. This is when Tarot, like blue black Tarot, was a big thing.
Right.
Like any death touch creatures that are black specifically, because a lot of them don't have hard removal, and they just get absolutely bored by as well.
Yeah, true. And then Boros. Vogel's probably decent because of all the declaimers and the oof plus all of the Chainer's edicts.
Yeah. Like obviously Boggles has that chance to just one shot you sometimes. It happens, but like Fume's main deck, Cryptrat's main deck, and then four edicts as well. It's pretty decent. I would say you're probably favored game one, and then you can very very easily win a game two or a game three.
So what kind of player likes to play this kind of deck? What was your
Players that
play
don't
style? I know you
players
talked
that
about
don't
Pox, but I don't know what that means.
yes. So I play a lot of Pox in like I play like some Legacy. Like I really love Pox in that format. So like just really grinding games to like slow halts and winning slowly. I think if you're like a lot of people that I know approach this deck from like a mid-rangey perspective, and it has a lot of like mid-range elements, but at the same time, you also have a lot of the control elements too. If you are like a die-hard mid-range player, like you love synth and things, I'm not sure this is necessarily the kind of deck that you'd enjoy, because it does win so slowly, and your value engines like it's you have to play around a lot of stuff because like with initiative, especially in the initiative monarch build like this one that I was playing at the open, you can just get yourself absolutely blown out by making one small mistake. Like
Right.
initiative is that powerful. If you lose it for a silly reason, you just lose that game. So if you like really, I think people that have played a lot of blue might like it. It doesn't have the card selection, but the decks that are like slower, if you like the slower grindy stuff, it's very good at that. It can be fast too, but it's really all in on being slow, winning the late game.
That makes sense. So let's go over to the current build and talk about the development of
Yes.
this. So in late September, maybe Sticker Goblin comes online. So everyone's all in on mono red and becomes a huge board part of the metagame. And then we also have like blue white glitters is one of the decks that just kind of like it's all over the place at the moment.
Yes.
So Heisen built a deck that's essentially I don't really understand, but it's just attempt to not lose by any means and then at some point win somehow. So is that's what you saw and then you started building your own variant basically?
Kind of, yeah. And that unfortunately is kind of how this deck wins. Like you're not trying to win fast, or you are playing very slowly. Um,
So let's
but
walk
yeah,
me through the list. You've got a base of swamps, so this is the same mono black deck splashing green. You've got the Colony
hmm
Gardens and the Deadly Dispute Reckoner's Bargain. A couple of Golgari Rot Farms, and that's specifically to pick up this Bajuka Bog or Joymire and the Garden for more value, I guess.
yep, absolutely. Mainly picking up Bajuka Bog, sometimes
Hmm.
picking up Grotto to Scry. It's just you have a lot of utility lands that are great.
Then only a single Blood Fountain? Is that because you're going to recycle with Campfire?
Yeah, so this deck as well, like compared to before, like you had a bunch of the initiative creatures and also trolls and all that other stuff. This deck is again, you're more trying to. you don't need the creatures to win. It sounds really silly, but in the current meta, because of how fast, like blazingly fast it is, you don't need like a top end creature. You just need to live. I can explain sort of the win cons, but Blood Fountain is more there, in my opinion, to create an early like set of like artifacts to sack for your draw spells later on, which sometimes has the upside of getting you back a Crypt Rats for another board wipe or a Fangren Marauder late game.
So as only two campfires in the main deck here, this is basically anti-decking versus some sort of life gain. It's just like
Yeah,
incidental life gain that you could potentially use. But over here is your real life gain with Fang and Marauder.
absolutely. Yeah, this card's really, really, really good right now. Getting to 6 mana is tough, but if you get there with like, it's easy to get there with like 2 Lembas on the battlefield and a treasure token kicking around, and maybe a blood token, and people are playing a lot of stuff that gets like they can't deal with this if it sticks is the idea.
Right.
And you have less downsides to like if it gets killed like with initiative. You can slam this and force them to have it sometimes, but
It's
yeah,
kind
it gains a lot of life.
it's kind of funny to me because we have this metagame where you have mono red, which is so fast that you can't play combo, and because you can't play combo, you can play this Dirtle City deck that
Yes.
absolutely gets murdered by combo, but you
Yeah,
can't even play combo in the metagame. So this Garden Heisen's like, here I come. I'm gonna play my deck that wins on turn
that's
75.
that's exactly it. Yeah, no, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. This deck, if your metagame is like heavily combo, don't play this list. This
you
list
will
is
get
awful.
you will get absolutely
Uh,
trashed.
one of my one of my close friends, he is an absolute wizard with Poison Storm. I know you like Poison Storm,
Nice.
and if I face against him, it's like just getting an automatic loss. Like there's just no way you beat that deck with this very easily. They have
And
to
because you
play really
have
badly, and
once again you've got a bunch of one for ones, right? With the cast downs. I guess Chainer's Edict is a two for one, but
mm,
what you've done is cut the defiles entirely. And we talked about this before. The defiles are now Crypt Rats, Fumes, and two Drown in Sorrow,
yeah, we're
which are
more all
very
in
effective. Like
on.
this basically is saying like I think I'm gonna win the die roll and not get killed on turn three.
Yeah, look, the good thing is a lot of people on turn 3 are not just trying to like value Kuldotha you anymore. They're trying to get the sticker goblin out. So, assuming you have some form of interaction, snuff out is free, cast down, and can be used on their turn as well. You can stop them from just one-shotting you, and if you don't immediately die to the Kuldotha like storm, very chatter stormy almost,
Right.
you can usually just wipe their entire board with drown and fumes and just recover from there.
So as the Coldota player, as this I when I face this deck, basically what I try to do is present a cloth and
Hmm.
then try to sandbag so that once the Marauder comes out, I can one shot and go over the
Yep.
top. That's basically what I want to do. Uh, but the Crypt Rats itself is like also another huge board wipe because for 4 mana you take out all the 1/1s and then
Yeah,
Snuff Out
it's
is a problem.
incredible.
Hmm.
Yeah,
We're
like
gonna get super anti-meta where the mono red deck is gonna play Apostle's Blessing, so you can't snuff out the sticker goblin,
you know
so
what?
that you can go all in.
Someone needs to try that. Yeah, no, that's a terrifying thought. Don't think I would ever play around that. But I guess even then, it's a turn later, right? Which is all this deck wants. It wants to get to turn 4. It wants to sit there and not do anything for as long as possible. That's why you've got that Scry land and you're running Grotto and things as well. Um, yeah, like the idea with Fangren as well in this deck, I think, is not to play it as a big beater that gains life. It's to play it as a life gain stick first and then a beater second. Like, you could play it on 6, but the deck drags the game out so long that you're happy to play it when you have 8 mana to immediately, like, crack a Lembus or cast a Deadly Dispute and then sack a treasure and really, really maximize your, like, because again, it has no ETB. I've always been not a massive fan of creatures that don't have big impact on the game, but
Right.
if you play it right, you can get a lot of immediate value from it. Like people can try and remove it, but you can just crack your stuff in response, gain a bunch of life, and that can usually stabilize pretty hard.
That's one of the things that I've had a problem with Fang and Marauder in the Altertron deck is that as 6 mana, if you're playing it on, like, let's say I have Tron on turn 3, I
Hmm.
crack something so that now I have 6 mana exactly. I play the Fangor Marauder, then my red opponent untaps and kills me. Like, you have
Yeah.
to actually get to the point where it's going to make an impact, and you can sacrifice 1 or 2 artifacts on that turn. So then you have plus 10 life, plus a 5/5. And if you're just going to slam this, they can definitely get past it, or it can get snuffed or journeyed or something, and then it's not going to be able to make a big impact for sure.
Yeah, totally.
So it looks like you just took a Rowan's Grim Search over a single Reckoner's Bargain.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm not entirely fully dead set on this list. Still in a lot of testing. I kind of took Heisen's list, gave it a couple tries, had a lot of success with it, a couple 4-1s and a 3-2, and then was like, okay, sure, let's figure out like what might make this a little stronger. I cut down a lot of the tap lands. I think as much as I love like a lot of the value some of the tap lands give, I just don't want to die early. I want to have up that like I want to be mana efficient in the early game because I think the early game is so important right now. You don't have time to like counter garden, rock farm, replay garden. You could just be dead by then. Um,
Yeah, that's one
so
of the things that I'm struggling with in the Poison deck is it's all tap lands. So
yes,
how do I get to turn 4? And I'm not sure what
exactly.
to do exactly on that yet. So you got any tips? You got any tips? I don't want to
Any
have to
tips for turn
play
four?
regular basics. I need the value. All right, so
Yeah, I don't know. Oh,
yeah,
the sideboard for this deck is super weird.
let's move over
I
to the
love it though.
sideboard here because it's interesting. I gotta add one of these cool stresses and get rid of this silly one.
Sweet, yeah.
Give
Oh,
me
it is
that one.
supposed to be four. I think there's only
Oh, okay. So is there another card missing from the sideboard here?
there should be a. Oh, that is strange. Yeah, there should be another Pachuca bog actually in the sideboard.
Okay. Does that look good now?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay, so over here in the
Um,
sideboard, we've got two Circle of Protection blue. That's tech from Walker, but you're planning to
okay.
play this off of specifically Deadly Dispute and Crystal Grotto?
Yes, it's
So
yeah,
how does
it
that? It's
is a
just an
little spooky.
extremely late game thing.
So it can be a little bit spooky, but you do draw a ton of cards. Lembas Wellspring plus all of your like pseudo art, ancestral recall effects can really dig you a lot of cards. Rowan Scrim Surge can dig you a lot. Um, if you could ever get like protection blue against Terra, for example, that's why
Right.
it's in
It's just
here.
GG at that point.
Yeah, you basically can just lock them out the game because you get to a point where you can develop your mana enough to just do it on like 6 creatures and then also gain 2 life with a campfire or something silly.
So at what point? Um, at that point, though, they could start trying to jam their Mystic, their Murmuring Mystic.
Yeah, so Mystic is a big issue for Gardens in general, less so this version because you are running so many sweepers. But Murmuring Mystic generates a ton of value for those blue decks, and it is a kill on sight creature. Don't let them untap with it because they will drown you, especially with the flyers. Another reason why I've been cutting initiative recently is because of stuff like Mystic that just like blows you out.
So why are you playing Weather the Storm in this deck versus more Campfires?
Yeah, so before I used to play Campfire, obviously, my main reasoning was it sacks the Deadly Dispute, and also it like doesn't need green mana. So my previous list, if you look at that, it has a lot less green sources than this one does.
Oh, okay,
That's the
that's
main
true.
difference.
One, yeah, there's like you've got the Rot Farms, the Grotto, and the Campus that are all extra green sources, so you pretty much have double the amount.
Yeah, so it's much easier to get your Weather the Storm, and also this game like is this deck is much easier at getting itself to that long game. The first deck that that we showed needs to survive, and Campfire coming down a turn earlier and just not relying on your opponent storming off, it can let you survive a little bit longer, even if it is a little mana efficient. But in this deck, where you're basically holding up mana the entire game, or like blowing up their entire board, and at that point you're not too fussed about Weather the Storm. It's much stronger for this sort of shell. I think I would switch between like if I'm playing more of a mid-rangey Gardens, I would definitely be on more Campfires. I think again because I'm in love with that card. But Weather the Storm in the slower ones is great.
Yeah. So the duress is mostly for combo or what?
Yeah, for combo, because this build is so slow that if you go against a combo deck that isn't like heavily creature based, you're gonna get absolutely drowned. They just have too much. You don't have enough really to stop them. The rest is also good into control stuff where like you do have crucial spells you need to resolve. It clears the way for other things.
Have you thought about playing
Ravens, correct?
Raven's Crime?
Yeah, so I have
I
been
don't have
thinking
it.
about it. It is something that I do want to actually try. Um, so I played a lot of Raven's Crime in Legacy sometimes. People have it as like a one-off just because with like Life from the Loam and stuff. We don't really have a land rebuy effect in this format, which is why I'm a bit more unsure because it isn't targeted, of course. And a lot of decks use their graveyard. Like if you say to Terra, please discard a card, and they go, sweet, thank you. You know, it gives them value from it still. Um, like if
Well, you could maybe
it,
do like duress, 3 duress and 2 Raven's
oh,
Crime, and then
I suppose that's true.
run them
Yeah.
out. The thing is, like, I've played against this one player that continuously like sandbags a bunch of lands and then just Raven Crimes me for like 5 cards, and I'm
You
just
know
like,
what? That
okay.
sounds great.
And I was playing familiars. I had my Mortuary Mire in my hand. I'm like, I can't lose. They're like, please discard 6 cards. I'm like, oh no.
Mm.
So that
Yeah,
was an
maybe
interesting
there's
thing.
something there. I don't hate it. Like I definitely think this deck has a lot of flex slots, a lot of like innovation. There's not really a settled list right now. It's like sort of a new, I guess it's still sort of kind of a newer deck. It's settled a bit. But there's not like a ton of people working to like sort of change it and build new stuff. So like new things pop up and people try things. But maybe I'll give Ravens Card a run. It looks interesting.
And you said there's a Gardens Discord. Is that relatively active?
Yeah, I run that, so I set it up because I wanted to just try and get more people to help brew. Basically, we're at 180 people now. I checked this morning, which is nuts. It's but like people kind of pop in to check deck lists and talk about stuff briefly when spoilers get spoiled. Um, just as a heads up, don't play that Cascade Cave. I hate it. I think it's really bad. You shouldn't play it. Um, but yeah, no, that's mainly the people will just pop in. It's fairly popular though.
That's cool. So I'll link that in the description of the video. And
Sweet.
then the other 2 cards in the sideboard are Drown in Sorrow and Moment's Peace, which
Yep.
basically are pretty clear what you're going to use them for. Are you going to bring in
Yeah.
Moment's Peace is going to be like any aggro deck, of course, just to kind of get to the next turn over and over. And
Absolutely,
then Drown in
especially
Sorrow
against
for the go wide
Golgotha.
decks. Yeah, I mean, this deck having the access to Moment's Peace is kind of frustrating for the Kadotha player because, like, you don't know when you're going to be bringing in Flaring Pain or not.
Hmm.
So, although, like, there's certainly room to bring in Flaring Pain here because there's basically no creatures until this deck is already winning. So, in my deck, I could potentially cut some stuff for Flaring Pain for sure.
Yeah,
It's just like I think one of the bonuses of being this sort of like rogue brew anti-meta deck is that the meta decks don't really see it coming, basically.
yeah. They or like you're not a big enough, I guess, threat to them that like they have to tech against you a bunch.
Right.
Um, it's also hard to tech against a pile of cards that just kills everything you're trying to do because there's not really a lot of win cons outside of creatures. The worst matchup for this deck, I honestly think, is Poison Storm, and the reason you can play this right now is
It's because Poison
because
Storm is not viable.
yeah, like when more combo and like these slower alternative like decks become good again, we will have to adjust. And the big thing with this deck that I would like to stress is you have to keep adjusting. Like there's never a set list; it's never finished. More so than I think a lot of other decks. It's not like a perfect list. You got to tech to your own meta game. Like, don't just copy this list. If you play a lot of against a lot of combo, run maybe mainboard the rest and things, or like, you have to adjust your slots and really think about what you're going to tackle, and then decide what beats that best, and try and
Okay. So
tinker with
let's
it.
think about the main deck and then talk about
Hmm.
what the flex slots are. So you've got a bunch of removal spells. Would you
Yep.
consider like what
Uh,
are your flex slots here? Can you point them out?
sure. My flex slots in this list would be the one of Rowan's Grim Search is
Okay.
the first flex slot. The second Campfire. the fourth crypt. So yeah, oh, that works sweet. So that the fourth crypt rat is a flex slot, I think. The third Fangren, I'm not too sure about the third Fangren Marauder yet, but I think the third one is definitely a flex slot. And then the last flex slot is probably that Snuff Out too. I think basically all those two drops right there, that's your core. Like that's the way this deck works. Plus the crypt rats. Like if you're gonna build a gardens list, you're gonna put four cast down, four chainers. You know the deadlies, at least two reckoners, and then some eggs. That's just the core of the whole deck. That's how you like get all of your card advantage. And
I mean,
then
this right here, the Deadly Dispute, Reckoner's Bargain, Ichor Wellspring, that's like,
yeah,
if you're playing black, you're playing these cards because they're the best draw, pretty much the best draw engine in the format.
yeah, it's incredible. Like please never cut Deadly Dispute. That card is fantastic. Being Ancestral Recall with Wellspring is not a joke. It like can refuel you, and you can get some crazy turns late game if you can just riff off a bunch of draw spells. I guess maybe Lembas is a flex slot. Like I didn't run it in my Pauper Open version, but this deck is slower, so it does want those.
Yeah, still synergy with Banger and Marauder too, and continuing to rebuy it as you go later and later in the game. I feel like that's
Exactly.
pretty good. Because like when you have tons of mana, one thing that I've noticed about Lemba specifically is that okay, it costs 2 mana to play and 2 mana to activate. 2 mana Lembas, scry one, draw a card. That's pretty bad. Like if
Mm.
I would not want to do that on turn 2 and feel happy about it. 2 mana to sacrifice and gain 3 life. That's very medium as well. But when you've got 8 mana on the table, then you're just really chaining off. Like you're already at the point where you can just
Yeah.
play for 4 mana. You can sacrifice it with the scry trigger on the stack, so you get the gain 3, and then you shuffle it back in, so you could potentially draw more. Especially even with Aldertron, when you have tons and tons of mana, you're just doing tons of like it's high value late game card for sure.
Yeah, that was going to be my tip as well. Is if you're in a late game situation, you just need to find a card or gain some life, sack it with the trigger on the stack, so you can maybe redraw it because it does redraw and scry again. But it's just really good. They're really good with Fangren Marauder as well. Being able to pay 2 mana and just gain 8 life is not bad at all.
Right? One thing
You
people
will want to
talked
hold
about
them.
was that this is an anti-decking card, which it is not, because
No, it
you're
is not.
always
Yeah.
going to draw. So even if you had 0 cards in library, you could play this, sacrifice it, and redraw it. But next turn, you're still drawing a card for turn, so you're definitely going to deck out at
Yes.
some point.
Yeah, I mean, it puts itself back in. I guess that counts if you're like, if it's like, oh, my opponent's got 2 cards in deck, I've got like 2 as well. I can put this back in. Sure, it might work there if you don't replay it, but yeah, if you've got no cards left, your only anti-decking measure is Campfire, and you will force your opponent to deck a lot. That is a genuine win con for this list. Probably more so online because people are going to try and clock you, which is a thing that's going to have to happen if you're playing this on Magic Online. You will need to play fast. In paper, I think if people realize they're going to deck and they can't kill you, they'll probably scoop. But yeah, like especially against like blue black fairies, core gates and stuff. Even in the mirror, the best way to win the mirror is make them deck themselves out. It's a genuine win condition. Like you should be thinking about it. If your opponent's library starts getting low, that should be on your mind at all times. Like how many cards have you got in deck? How many have they got? Especially if they have the Monarch. You can let them have the Monarch and not take it on purpose. It sounds very unhinged, but just you have so much like gaining so much life can make a lot of their cards so irrelevant, and a lot of their
Right.
removal is dead. So if they draw a bunch of cards, especially if they're like a removal deck, it doesn't help them a lot. A lot of times, obviously it's not great, but it does also reduce their like deck twice as fast. So that's something to note.
So if you were playing, so these are like the flex slots here, right? One, two, three, four, five.
Yeah.
So if you're playing combo, you're saying you want to maybe make these duresses and ravens crimes. If you
Oh
expect a
yeah,
lot of,
for
let's say you
sure.
expect, I guess if you expect like affinity, you would play some oofs or something. But what
Yeah,
if
the
you're
oofs
playing against?
maybe.
I guess this is already set up for terror. It's specifically teched out to beat red and glitters in the main deck, right?
Yeah, for
Like what are the
sure.
what
And
are the
like,
decks that you're trying specifically to beat with this setup? I guess
so
everything, but
Yeah, you are trying like super hard in on trying to beat red and glitters. They're the main two because they have such fast kills that if you shut them down, it's kind of free. Well, maybe less so glitters, but if you can slow them, you can usually get to a point where you can stop them from ever being able to kill you again, which is a nice feeling. Then also the other two big ones, of course, are Terror, which I think just decks like this are pretty good against anyway. Again, because of all the removal, having more snuff outs makes you pretty sweet against them too. And then Core Gates is a funny one because, again, I think it's very 50-50. Like, access to the sweepers against them can be very good, and the chainers for the Guardians. I know I was speaking with GN a little bit about this. I think a lot of the Core Gates players think it's favored their way. A lot of the Gardens players think it's favored theirs. So it's definitely a 50-50, I think.
So let's go ahead and talk about just with this list. We're going to do six top six decks. We're going to sideboard, okay? Because that's
Okay.
one of the things that people want to know. That people need to know. So we're going to go with burn first. So let's get rid of
Okay.
this Chainer's Edict, and then I'll put this
Which
pile right here.
which
And
flavor
then,
of burn are we talking about today? That's the
oh,
Cordova?
burn. That's true. That's true. Let's see. We will talk about let's let's go the top three burn decks. We got Sticker, got regular
Mm-hmm.
Coldotha, and then Pinger Burn, right?
Okay. Yes.
So if you're playing against the deck that I like, which is the Sticker Burn kill you on turn two
Mm-hmm.
deck, what would you bring in?
Okay, so first thing I'm saying, I want the Moment's Pieces probably
Right, because it's
guaranteed.
an attack deck.
Yeah, like if they spend their entire turn like throwing out a Bushwhacker and Cordothas, and you can Moment's Piece them, even just the first one is really strong. I normally like to look at what I want to cut first, and then because I don't want to overboard is my main thing. I don't want to be forcing cards out when they might be good. So the
Okay.
cards that I think are bad in this matchup is Blood Fountain is not great. I don't know if I need the two campfire because I'm probably going to be bringing in weathers, so I probably cut the campfires here. Weirdly, they're a very dirtly card, and you're probably not decking yourself against mono red. Like they'll either weirdly they will deck themselves first a lot of the time in my like experience, which is
So
weird.
you're literally just saying, I'm gonna stop everything you're doing, and you're just
Yeah,
gonna lose at some point.
I I would probably keep one. I think I normally keep one in actually, one campfire. You don't need the second
Okay.
though. I don't think.
Okay.
Chainers is not great against them. I would usually trim two of those for some more like sweepers because the sweepers just get so much value against them. Brett is a little slow against them. I usually go down to three. And then again, Fangren we can trim on as well. I think two is fine against them. And then now I would kind of start looking at what do I want to bring in. So I want to bring in those four Weather the Storms as well. And then, oh, sorry, and I want to trim on probably. See, the thing is, I do really like the extra Drowning Sorrows against them because if they have their combo turns and you get to just blow them out, it's really strong. So Rowan's Grim Search seems quite bad here. I'd probably trim one of those. And the question is, do I want an eighth card for that last Drowning Sorrow? I'm not too sure. You could maybe trim another Chainers just because it's not amazing against them.
It
I'd
basically
probably be
does nothing.
something like this. Yeah.
So that's an eight
Like
card
a,
swap. Make sure to screenshot it if you want to save that. All right, so let's sort by mana value again. And the second deck we're going to talk about is well, I guess Call Gates is the second most high meta presence. So you want to talk about Call
okay.
Gate?
Yeah, Colgate is again a very tough one. The Drowning Sorrows, I think, are decent there because again they have a lot of creatures that replace themselves, like the Sacred Cats and the Squadron Hawks.
Right.
Like if you can, because again, in the controlling mirrors, which you want to be like trying to 2-for-1 or get as much value as possible. The chainers, don't feel great, but you need to you can't cut any of those in this matchup.
Right, because you have to have an out to the Guardian.
Yeah, you've got to be able to beat Guardian. So, it's tough. I always struggle with core gates. I think Blood Fountain can come out just because they don't run any actual hard removal.
So you're just gonna
Like a
play
lot of
around the counter spells and stuff.
um, I don't know. I normally bring in Duress, but you kind of have to concede that they are a control deck that has counterspell, and you are not, so you are going to struggle. Um, I would normally trim one stuff out. It's okay against them, but sorry, a cast down instead of a not a stuff out. Sorry, because it's like very awkward. I do really struggle. I need to speak with some of the core gates guys on what they think would be good here. Probably cutting. This is tough. This is one I always struggle with. I couldn't say for sure. Like, I don't
So do you
know. I
think
feel
that you're just
supposed to
gonna
just.
cut these two for Drown in Sorrows and set it free, or do you think that you are gonna cut some other things for Duresses?
I
I feel
think.
like the problem here is that the Drown in Sorrow are decent. You already have Crypt Rats as a board wipe.
Yeah. I think actually with the four Crypt Rats, I'm probably not bringing the Sorrow,
Yeah.
just because the Crypt Rats like is a creature which is relevant too. It's like less susceptible to some counter magic than the Drown. The other reason I like the split of Suffocating Fumes and Sorrow in this matchup is just in case they are running Dispel over like Spell Pierce as well. Like Drown and Sorrow does dodge Dispel. Yeah, like cast down is not great. You don't really want to play one for one removal against them. So I think I normally trim two cast down and one Fangren. Again, like the
Makes
Fangren's
sense to
there.
me.
The Fangren is mainly there for like the mid-rangey stuff. There's an argument that maybe you should be playing the moments pieces as well because it can buy you so much time against the like a Guardian that just comes in for lethal. But I don't know. It's a hard matchup. I think this one is the most skill intensive and like it really depends on your player skill compared to your opponent. Like you have to play it very cleanly, and if they play really well, it makes it your life very very difficult.
Yeah. You don't have a lot of win conditions, and they have a lot of inevitability as well as multiple two for ones, but they are drawing a lot of
Yeah,
cards, I guess. It's going to be
all of
interesting.
their creatures like you're trying to drag this game out as long as possible, and they're happy to just sit there and draw four basilisk gates and make it so you have to you have to kill everything, which doesn't feel good.
Right. That's it. Makes sense to me. So then what about a mono blue terror deck?
Sweet, yeah. So this is where the spicy one of Bajuka Bog on the sideboard is great. So we're definitely bringing in that Bajuka Bog. I mean, protection blue. If you're not bringing it against Terror, you're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Um, and then Duress is an interesting one. So against Terror, I'm probably cutting. Yeah, again, cutting the Blood Fountain again. Like, it's really not there for the top meta decks. It's there for like a lot of the mid-rangey piles. The same as with that third Fangrim Marauder, which is why I'm not too sure about them as card choices. And then definitely cutting at least the one of those Drowning Sorrows. It doesn't get a lot of value against them. So the problem is now, right, is this is a post-board game, so they are probably bringing in Murmuring Mystic. So that is something you have to consider. Like, it would be great to cut all these things, but you do have to deal with Mystic. And, like, Crypt Rats is fine against them to deal with the Mystic stuff. But, you know, it does a lot of damage to you. So I think I normally would cut the Drowns here and
Think
keep the
so?
fumes. Yeah, I would cut both the Drowns. I like the fumes to deal with, like, just because it's an instant speed, if you can force them to tap out on their turn, you can get a lot of value off of that.
Sure. My thought
Again,
was that Drown in Sorrow takes out a Delver, whereas Fumes does not.
oh, it does hit the flip delvers. Yeah, that is a good
So I
point.
was thinking of cutting the Fumes and leaving two Drown in Sorrow somehow. But
Yeah, probably that is. I mean, that is a
you could
three for three
even
as well.
Campfire, but I don't think the extra Drown in Sorrows are very good.
Yeah, like I don't think you want to bring in any more. I guess you could probably cut one campfire for a moment's peace again because they do assemble board states of a bunch of creatures sometimes, and you just need an extra turn.
Right.
But it's usually like I want to bring in Bajuka Bog and protection for guaranteed, and then the next stuff is like kind of you know it sort of depends on their list. Like if they have Murmuring Mystics main deck and stuff, then I'm more inclined to probably bring in Moment's Peace, and maybe I am gonna bring in like another. Maybe I'm not taking that Fumes out if I see they have another Mystic and stuff like that. But again, I'm like this is like a new brew. I've only been playing this for like 2-3 days, so a lot of my sideboarding with
You're
this list
supposed to be the
specifically.
expert.
Yeah, well, the thing is, this is the thing. It's like
It's the
it's
same deck,
really
it's just different cards, so.
yeah. Like the play style is so different, and I think that's a good thing. Like learning to play this well is learning to be adaptable. Like if you see a certain card in your opponent's main deck that you like know you need to play around, then you can change your like sideboarding. I'm very loose with my sideboarding. I don't like hard sideboard guides because I like to see what my opponent kind of plays and has. Because people play weird tech cards all the time and just try and adjust and course correct for that sort of stuff. Like there are the cores, of course. Like you always want that Bajuka Bog and the Circle of Protection. I don't know. Weirdly, I don't think I cut a land for Bajuka Bog. I'm imagining it more of a spell than a land.
Yeah, it's a tech piece and the circle of
Yeah.
protection here. So the last one, let's just do quick, is the Azorius Affinity deck, or the blue-white Ninja Affinity that is
Yeah.
Glitter's deck. So
Yeah. The
is that
deck
where you
is.
want the Duresses?
Yeah, you want. So I think so. The first thing I normally go is I want Moment's Peace against this deck because it could just kill me really fast. That's not fun. Um, a lot of their board, all of their creatures have 2 toughness except for Mirror Enforcer, so those Drowning Sorrows are sweet value. So I bring those in too.
Okay.
And then looking at what I don't want to run, I probably don't. I can probably cut a. Once again, against the meta decks, the Blood Fountain's not amazing, so I'm probably cutting the Blood Fountain. A Fangrim Marauder here is amazing against them. If you can get it out, it just wins on its own.
So is your plan to
Chainers,
like wipe their deck and then one for one if they have a glitters and then eventually just attack or crit rats them?
yes, yeah, totally. Like the idea is you get to a point because they don't run. As far as I'm aware, they're not running like removal for Crypt Rats anyway to kill it. So you kind of like blow up their like initial attempts to kill you, and then use Crypt Rats and the other sweepers to just hold them hostage for the rest of the game, but until you can blow them up and kill them with it. Like because you have the 3 snuff outs, you have the cast downs, you have all this like removal to kind of like slow their initial win attempts, especially bringing in the Moments Pieces as well. And then after that point, you're looking to just either slam a Fangrin or a big Crypt Rats and just win the game from there.
So you're gonna cut the Blood Fountain and a couple edicts or something?
Yeah, definitely the chainers are not amazing here. I'm probably cutting 2, maybe even 3. Depends on the how much I want to bring in, or like.
Looks like
So
we got 4
yeah,
cards to bring in, so that works
yeah,
out.
definitely. I think you can cut 1 campfire here. I don't think they're a deck that's in like you're running 2 for those control mirrors, and they're not a deck that's incentivized to counter a campfire like maybe Core Gates or Terror might be. So you don't need that one, which means you got a slot to probably bring in at least 1 duress here.
Do you think if one of Duress is any good?
No, I like to bring in 4, but like I guess I feel like it's probably better than the campfire. Um, it's awkward. Like
It's hard
I
to
don't know.
say. I think I would
Maybe
probably
just
leave
having
the
the
campfire
camp.
in because
Yeah, maybe just having it is better.
that chip damage is what tends to kill you as well. Like the single ginger brutes that are just pecking in for 1 or 2 over and over. If you're like
Yeah. Oh,
stopping
and
that completely,
Gingerbrute is another reason the initiative version, in my opinion, is not great right now. Is because even if it doesn't have the glitters on it, a lot of the time it can be like they can use it as removal bait. Because it can give itself unblockable for 1 mana. They can slam it, has haste, they can get in. And if you have the initiative and they can threaten to steal it, you go, sure, I held up my mana to kill, this creature, you kill it, and then they slam like a glitters afterwards, and you're just looking a bit silly.
yeah, that makes sense. So one thing we didn't
Yeah.
talk about was what's your plan. So okay, we already talked about the sideboarding, but so what's your plan versus mono red, just on a high level? Mono red.
So
Let's talk about mono red aggro and mono red pinger.
yeah, okay. This deck I think is a lot weaker to the pinger version as well because you're on a lot less 1-for-1 removal and your 1-for-1s. Like you're running stuff out over the files a lot of the time. But overall against red, the game plan is I need to live, I need to survive this early game. And then late game, I will win. I will find a way to win.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about your win con. Your win con is, you'll gain a lot of life and eventually either beat them down with Fangren or, blow them up with a Crypt Rats.
Are
But
you
yeah, you
worried
really want
about
to be.
them relicking you because of the campfire and being decked?
Relic is. I mean, I think if they bring in Relic against you here, you don't have that much graveyard synergy, and it's probably less good for them than it is, like anything else. Yeah, Campfire does stop you from being able to deck, but against mono red, I think decking you can usually kill them before you deck, because they don't gain life. Like a lot of the reason the campfire is important is because so many decks durdle and gain life right now. But
Yeah,
when their life total doesn't go up, it's very easy to get them dead with a Crypt Rats eventually, or a Fangren, for example.
true.
So I'm looking for hands against mono red. If I know my opponent is like a mono red player, or if I know they're playing red for whatever reason, I'm looking for hands with. If it's the stickery versions, the Kuldotha ones, I'm looking for hands that have early removal to deal with the sticker goblin, and then I'm looking for ways to consolidate after they slam a bunch of guys and hit me for probably a lot of damage.
Looks like
So
you have a lot of ways to do that. You got 7 sweepers with Crypt Rats and ground,
yeah, so
and
I'm
then
looking for
7. Interesting how that lines up. You got 7 instant speed removal, 1-for-1s, and 7 sweepers. Did you do that on purpose?
yeah, I wanted to have like a nice even amount of like stuff you can do. Like suffocating fumes is instant speed, so it's kind of like a bit of both. But I like having the good like mix of sweepers and 1-for-1s, and then the chainers break the parity for a lot of the other stuff too.
Right.
But yeah, if you see fumes in your opening hand against red that's castable and you have enough cards in hand to sort of like take out a sticker goblin to stop them getting, so you can get to that fumes, that is a really good hand normally. Just because if they do try and go for a big, massive bushwhacker turn, it basically kills everything in their deck except for Swift Spear. I don't know if many of the sticker decks are running the enchantment anymore. That's something
Okay.
to consider if they start doing the cave thing. Then it gets a lot more difficult because now the Drowning Sorrows and Fumes don't work. Don't tell red players about this. Don't let them do that, please. Um,
There's a
but
lot of learning
yeah,
the sideboard with the red deck, uh,
yeah. So
in
if
or
that does
maybe in
become a
general.
thing, start looking to bring in like declammers into your sideboard and things as well, ready to be able to combat that because you have to play around it.
Right.
But yeah,
And then versus the Pinger Goblin, you're just looking for as many removal spells as possible, right? And they're gonna be probably bringing in more of the Weather the Storms.
yeah, Weather the Storm against that deck is fantastic. I want to
Sorry,
bring
brother.
it in against red anyway, but it's so much better against the Pinger stuff. Um, the main difference is you're not bringing in the extra sweepers, and you're not bringing in the what's it called? The
Spaces.
moments pieces. They're not as relevant, but you might consider bringing in duress just because you want to stop them from being able to refill because it buys a lot of time.
Right. You can duress a Reckless Impulse or something.
Exactly, or I don't know if that deck plays synth, but synth is always a good target to duress away if you can.
Yeah.
It gets so much value. Creature and 2 draws, basically. It's gross.
I've been trying to figure out a way to do Sticker Goblin Pinger Burn, because then you're less weak to
Ooh,
sweepers. You just go off. But we'll find
like a
out if I can make that
transformative
happen.
sideboard plan,
I
or
did that before. Transformative
okay,
sideboard plan where I just turned into a Pinger Burn deck, and it was really good because it stops people from being able to sweeper you, and
yeah,
it turns everything into a damage spell. So interesting
yeah.
idea.
The 3 toughness is really awkward considering all our sweepers only hit 2, really, and our Crypt Rats does a bunch of damage to us, which is, not where you want to be against a deck that can pump a lot of damage very quick. The
Right.
main game plan against them is just keep their board clear. If you let them build up creatures, they'll kill you. So, you know, keep those cast downs and the chainers in. I don't cut chainers against the Pinger Burn. That's the main difference.
And we talked about how versus Colgate, you're just trying to keep the board clear as well.
Yeah, a lot of the matchups come out like they end up being like a board. You're like playing to the board in the sense that you need to keep it empty. Um,
Oh,
the best thing to do against decks like this is like sandbag those board wipes. make them overcommit, get the extra value from it. You like again, you're not trying to rush. You have a lot of ways to recoup life loss if they're not a super fast deck. Like let the core gates player get in with a cat a couple times if they're not pumping it to a stupid amount, and like
Kill
let
it and
them
then bog
overcommit.
it.
Yeah, killing and bogging is another thing. Or like if you know you've got a rot farm in hand, you can sandbag some removal to get a free, snipe on the cat with like a Bazooka bog and things like that. Like just small little advantages like that win games, especially in close matchups like that. So try and eke out as much value from the board wipes as you can. Like just hitting an extra Squadron Hawk with a Drowning Sorrow is insanely good value.
And then we kind of talked about how you approach the glitter stack and the terror deck as well, I guess. So that does cover it for me, I think, unless there's anything else you wanted to talk about with this kind of deck.
Yeah, just the main thing that I've kind of said a couple times is don't take like this list or any list you see as gospel with this deck. It's very meta dependent and it's very flexible. Like you have a lot of flex slots. Like this specific version has only like 5 flex slots or whatever, but the core is those 2 drops, that whole 2 drop slot, run those and some crypt rats, and that's your core. You can basically run almost anything else if it can win you games against your meta game. Like that's the main thing. Don't be afraid to like innovate and try stuff, and don't be afraid to just sort of like change out slots, tech it perfectly to your meta. Like if you play against a bunch of mid range, you want those sweepers and the rats, and maybe you don't want to play Fanger and Marauder, maybe you do want the initiative, and you know
Yeah, sure.
something to consider.
It's nice to have the ability to tech your deck to the metagame. Right now,
Yeah,
it's not metagame isn't moving too fast, but it's kind of like we went hyper aggro and now we're going hyper control, and then we'll see how it shakes
yeah.
out.
I don't see this deck falling out of like tier two. Like I don't ever imagine it going become bad. Like I think it's tier the bottom of tier one right now. It's it's still pretty behind a lot of the big four. The big four are very awkward, but it's uniquely positioned to like be able to be decent against all of them, which is why I like it. But I think it can survive in any sort of meta game by being adaptable. It's kind of got that like Jundy feel to it almost, where like it's not as aggressive as like an old school modern Jund deck, but you are like you know, you can tech this to do what you need it to do for any given sort of like meta game. If
Yeah,
Terra is big, bring in your Guildsworn Prowler's main, play a more like mid-rangey plan and just beat them down. If red stays big, this kind of list is great. You can do a whole bunch.
do you think you would stay to this kind of mana base and general setup that you've got here, even if you went back to the initiative type list? Just kind of
No,
swap
actually,
out.
I think if I go back to the initiative, I'm going back to my Northern Pauper Open style mana base because I want to run the trolls more. A big a big benefit of running the troll is that you can kind of cut lands and the trolls flip on the initiative. It's really good value.
Right, that
Um,
makes sense.
I think I probably would go up to 19 lands is my only thing. I'd add a Witch's Cottage, which is really, really strong with the Troll of Khazad-dûm,
Oh,
if you can
absolutely.
set that up.
You can
Um,
cycle for the Witch's Cottage.
yeah, I mean, I'm scared. So you can probably tell from my Northern Pauper open list that I don't like running tap lands whenever possible. I'm like on a bunch of swamps and I've cut the tap lands down to as few as possible. Some people swear by the rot farm. I'm probably unique in the regard that I don't like it. But I just don't want to lose tempo in a deck where like the meta is so fast is my
Yeah, that
main
makes sense.
concern.
Cool. Well, I think I'm gardensed out. I'm ready to grow as a player and watch some plants take over the game.
Sweet.
I don't know if I'm actually going to play this deck, but now I know a lot more about it, which is the important thing.
I'd be interested to see how you sort of approach it. A lot of people approach it differently from if they have different backgrounds. I know you play more combo-y stuff, so it'd be interesting to see if you could cook something interesting with it.
I'm just trying to take the parts of this deck that could get put into Poison Storm and then make that
Mm,
work better. Because, just a little thing here. Poison Storm is a blue deck, splashing green and black. But
yeah,
from what we're seeing, it looks like 4 Moments Peace main and 4 Weatherstorm is where I want to be. And then I probably need
yeah,
to change this mana base to be able to cast the Moments Peace on time. Because if I only have three or If I only have 4 green sources, it's not enough. But I think it could work out if I did it that way.
Yeah, makes
We'll
sense. I
see.
guess
We'll
you could
see.
probably run sweepers too, right? Even like Drown in Sorrow is
Drowned
potentially
Sorrow is
castable.
hard because of the black. So like Arms of Hadar
Few.
is doable, but
Okay,
it's interesting. I don't want to like
sweet.
cut on my draw spell package as much either, so
Yeah, that
mod
makes
limited.
sense.
Right now I'm trying to play a little bit less Pauper games and talk about the decks, so I was really happy to meet with you and really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on. And if
No, of course,
anybody
I
is
appreciate
interested
it.
in checking out more about Gardens, definitely check out the Gardens Discord. Or are you on the Castle of Commons Discord as well?
I am in there. Yeah, you could probably just drop me a message or a ping or something. I'll see it eventually.
And then are you on? You're on Twitter as well.
Yeah, at NYX IBH, I can drop that for you. But
All right.
yeah,
Well, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for
thank
checking
you.
out the video. Look forward to more in-depth deck discussions. I'm going to be talking to GN on Cog Gates. I'm trying to work out Byko for talking about everything, but we'll see.
Former expert.
Look forward to new upcoming types of video content that you can just listen to if you wanted to. All right, thank you very much, Nix.
Thank you.
I'll see you in the next video.